I've been wrestling with this story for a few days. I don't know that I got it yet, but I'm going to give it a shot. I was thinking about that old country western song, Donna Fargo. Funny Face, I Love You. You guys remember that song? Funny Face, I Love You. And she apparently, whoever wrote this song, that was her nickname, and it was precious to her. But I can't imagine going home and saying, hey, honey, funny face. She goes, oh, thank you. But that, she probably, I don't know what Lynn would say. But this was even worse. Now, have you ever been called a dog? I was at a boarding care recently, and one of the gentlemen there, I don't know why he was there. He probably had some form of dementia. And I walked by, and he wheels by. He says, what up, dog? So, we use it as slang, don't we? You've heard that. What up, dog? I used to know this man who, he was my good friend's father. And he had 2 or 3 daughters. I don't remember exactly, a couple daughters. And when he would see them, these would be his words. Let's make up a name. Susan. Hey, Susan, you ugly dog. And the thing is, they would smile because they knew what he meant, and I don't know why he wouldn't just say it. But he had this big grin on his face, and what he meant was, you're so beautiful. I love you. I appreciate you. So sometimes words have a different meaning. But yeah, I've been called dog. I remember once I went to took my daughter to the orthodontist, and it was summertime, and I told him that I was a teacher and I was off work, and he was working hard. And he said, you dog. And I was like, what? But I guess it's a slang term that some people use. What's up, dog? Now, I'm known as the chaplain that doesn't like dogs. I just don't. I have fear about dogs. Why is everybody laughing? All you brave people that have no fear of dogs. I'm known as if there's a word that there's some dogs, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go until we know that those dogs are locked up in the back room or in the backyard. It's a big issue for me. I have had some experiences. One where a young pit bull was about 5 feet from me. Guy holding the leash, but I mean, if he would have released that leash, I don't know what would have happened. I would have been tackled. I might have been killed. I don't know. It was one of those moments, and I thought, this is a power trip for him. He's got control because he's holding this dog. It was one of those, and I was terrified. Another time I went to a home, I knew they had Dobermans, but they were always in the backyard. I opened the door. They didn't answer the door, and sometimes at this home, I would just open the door and peek in, and I did. And this Doberman came running at me full speed, barking. And my life passed before me. I thought, this could be it. Then the dog didn't do anything. And the young man that took care of the dogs, he just looked at me and just laughed. Picked up the dog and walked away. I felt pretty embarrassed. Dogs. Another home I would go to, they had 2 or 3 puppies that were kind of in the back room, and I'd be singing to this lady. She loved music, and the dogs would start yelping. And every now and then the lady would look at her caregiver and say, can you shut those things up? And I'd have to say, they're the choir for us today, because there was no way to shut them up. And then finally, one place that I go, one of the residents has a dog that kind of roams around the facility. And for some reason, it's bad PR, but they don't clean up after this dog consistently. And I learned the hard way. You can just imagine that moment. Gary got it anyway. Dogs. Jesus called this woman, as Gabby so eloquently shared with us, he called her a dog. What's going on in this story? There's various interpretations out there. There's at least 3 or 4 main ones. One is that even though Jesus was the Messiah, the Son of God, he was an Israelite Jew, and he was a racist against anybody else who wasn't Jewish. And he had to learn just like anybody else, and this woman taught him how to open his heart to other people. Now, I don't believe that one, but it's out there. Maybe The translation actually could be interpreted the little puppies. Not calling her a dog, but a little puppy. And the puppies like to gather around the children, and it's all in the family. But still, would you want to even be called a little puppy? I don't know. So again, there's different interpretations. But when you look at the context of what Jesus was about, and I think this is what really helped me to come to a satisfying interpretation of this story. What was Jesus about? Jesus was about the salvation and the transformation of people everywhere he went. And he was inclusive. He didn't treat Gentiles differently than Jews. So why in this story would he do so intentionally? Now, maybe she did teach him in the sense that she offered confirmation that the gospel really was for the whole world. If Jesus needed that, and I'm not going to say that he did. Maybe it was primarily for the disciples to awaken, and that's where we're going to go. Maybe Jesus did intend to soften what he said by calling her a little puppy. I don't know. But he was mouthing the racist attitudes of superiority of his culture at that time. He was doing that, but why? That's the question. Why was Jesus calling this Gentile woman a little puppy or a dog? That's the question we need to answer. Because in all the events that are recorded in the Bible, we see Jesus acting from out of his purpose and understanding of his mission to reveal God and to save the world. So if the gospel is for the whole world, and we believe it is, if Jesus understood that, which I believe he did, but the disciples didn't. They didn't understand that. And if Jesus had just told them, and he probably had told them, you guys realize this message is not just for the Jewish people. But sometimes we need more than that. We need to see. We need to experience. Experiential learning. So going for a weekend getaway to the regions of Tyre, north of Galilee, stepping out of the comfort zone of Israel and Galilee that the disciples were familiar with. And Jesus saying, I've got a friend up there, or I've reserved a room at a bed and breakfast. We're just going to go and have a retreat. And maybe that was the plan, but Jesus was listening. And he was called to go up there. Now the word says, and let's go ahead and read the story. I'm reading from the New King James Version, Mark chapter 7, starting with verse 24. From there Jesus arose and went to the region of Tyre and Sidon, and he entered a house and wanted no one to know it, but he could not be hidden. I like that line. Jesus could not be hidden. For a woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard about him, and she came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, a Syro-Phoenician by birth, and she kept asking him. She kept on asking him to cast the demon out of her daughter. But Jesus said to her, let the children be filled first, and for it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. And she answered and said to him, yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs under the table eat from the children's crumbs. And then Jesus said to her, for this saying, go your way. The demon has gone out of your daughter. And when she had come to her house, she found the demon gone out and her daughter lying on the bed. That was a happy day. That was a happy day. Jesus, in this story, I believe, in this experience, was subversively getting his disciples out of their comfort zone, knowing that within a few years they would be scattered throughout the nations, proclaiming the gospel to Jews and Gentiles everywhere, and that they would turn the world upside down with the inclusive gospel that was for everyone. I believe that Jesus was looking ahead and could see and knew what the calling upon them would be. Have you ever noticed? I've noticed that when I get in a comfort zone and I think, life's good, I love being where I am, and there's always something, some little dissonance. Jesus, getting me out of my comfort zone. Because I can settle in and kind of get stale. He doesn't let me stay. Matthew records that the disciples cooperated with Jesus' behavior of snubbing this woman. They were happy to send her back to the hell that they thought she deserved. Get her out of here. She's disturbing our retreat. Send her back home. Her daughter has a demon. That's because these people have demons. Send her away, Jesus. Shall we escort her out of this house? Kick her out of our space? Yes, they were cooperating with his behavior, with his words. For after all, according to their thinking, she was a pagan dog. And they had no problem with that at that time. Praise the Lord that over time, their hearts opened to the bigger picture. But at that time, no, they had no problem with her being a dog. I believe that Jesus was setting up a template here. He was giving them an experience that they would be able to look back on in the future. It's like when I was in high school, and there was this girl I liked, and one Sabbath afternoon after church, she said, I'm going to the nursing home. You want to go? I didn't want to go to the nursing home to sing and hang out with all those old people, but I wanted to be with her, so I went. And that was the first time I remember when God touched my heart with the blessing of reaching out and ministering to other people, serving people. God used that occasion. And now, it's my day job, going to nursing homes and boarding care facilities to minister to elderly people. So I look back and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that memory. And I believe that later on the disciples looked back and they remembered. Remember that when we went up there and we thought we were just going to go hang out and avoid people, and what was Jesus doing there? Oh, that was for us. Duh. The lesson for the disciples, Jesus engaging in argument with this woman, giving her the dignity. In fact, she was not only a pagan, she was a woman. That a Jewish rabbi with any self-respect wouldn't even give her the time of day. But he engaged and allowed her to argue with him. He let her remain in the space despite what he was saying. He let her say her piece. He listened. He engaged despite that initial apparent snub and slur. And then he let her win the argument. And the disciples were probably scandalized by that. What? You let her win? Jesus, she just beat you in a theological argument. How did that happen? This guy's probably stayed up all night trying to figure that one out. Jesus is in the back room sleeping. He let her win. Perhaps saying in effect, you know what, daughter, just kidding. It's for these guys. I see, and God says this to everyone, I see God's image in you, even you. I see God's image in you. And yes, you, even you, are part of my kingdom. Come on in. Come on in. There's a healing for your daughter. There's a blessing for you. There's a new life. I can't wait in the life after this to hear the rest of the story. What happened to her and her daughter? When the church got established in that region, I bet she was on the front row. But Jesus right there felt the need to confront the stereotypes, the elephant in the room right there. And he did. And he accomplished many things with just that one experience, that one occasion. Think about it. He blessed this woman and healed her daughter. He taught his disciples something important that they would never forget. And he gave us, if we ever doubted that the gospel was big enough to cover every single person, here we go. He did it for us too. It reminds me of, there's a story in the Old Testament, Abraham, and God telling him, go sacrifice your son. Abraham probably argued with God. God, what? That's not like you. You wouldn't do that. Go do it, Abraham. Think about what was accomplished in that story. In one fell swoop, God provided an illustration of the gospel, the Father giving up his Son. Not only that, he tested Abraham's faith, which was apparently still needing a breakthrough, bringing Abraham to a deeper faith, deeper fellowship with his God, a deeper surrender. And then, I would argue, teaching the future people of God that this God does not, as many of the gods around, does not need you to slice and burn your children in order to win his favor. God's that way. One experience, one word, one story, one blessing. Infinite opportunity to understand God. But this really was scandalous. Allowing a pagan female god to win an argument with the Messiah, the King of Israel, the incarnate God. How could it be? But if we look at that story, who was it that really believed? Who was it that really had faith? Who was it that was persistent in seeking the heart of God and yet surrendered to whatever God called her to be? This woman is an example for us today. And so, a template for evangelism: tell the truth about the story. Be clear about the nature of the system that's being confronted by the gospel, which so many of the people had bought into. Maybe there was a little message for her. You know what? You need to turn your life around. You're in a mess. Maybe so. Be clear. Be totally clear that the paradox of full and complete surrender, which God calls us to every day, full and complete surrender and violent, take no prisoners persistence in seeking the heart of God, that's the way of the kingdom. It's taken me a long time to get my mind around that. For most of my life, I've either been sitting, waiting for God to be my sugar daddy and open up the doors and hold my hand and send me on my way, or out there trying to make stuff happen in the flesh. Well, God, it's up to me. I'm going to do this now. Instead, there's a place under that tent of blessing where we're totally and completely surrendered to the will of God, and yet, through Him, we are maniacally, passionately committed and persistent to pursue the kingdom of God and to share it with others. This woman may have been a woman of poverty, perhaps of degradation in her lifestyle, maybe a prostitute. One of those, somebody I talked to recently talked about the day when all the riffraff started moving in. I kind of winced, moving into San Bernardino, and I kind of winced. I was like, oh, how do you respond to that? But this lady remembered the good old days when San Bernardino was a fun place where she grew up, the riffraff. Maybe she was somebody that would be put in that category. Or, Mark says she was a Greek. Maybe she may have been an upper-class woman of wealth, maybe even a powerful woman used to having her way, educated, religiously sophisticated. The text doesn't tell us for sure. We don't know for sure. But either way, I believe that Jesus wanted her to encounter Him as so much more than just one of those traveling healers and magicians that made the rounds. And that she could manipulate by saying the right words. Oh, Lord, Son of David, come heal my daughter. No. Jesus wanted to bring her to the moment of her surrender, to face her utter helplessness and realize that even if she was a woman of wealth and power, she was a sinner in need of grace, in need of salvation, in need of healing, not just for her daughter, but for herself. She became willing to be the lowest in the kingdom, if that's what it took. A dog eating the crumbs falling from Israel's table in order to save her daughter. But something happened there. I just believe the light came on for her, that she got it. She was coming to understand. Jesus drew out of her heart The same thing we learned that was in his mother, Mary. Behold, the handmaiden of the Lord. Be it unto me according to your will, God. And I will persist in your word. I will obey the revealed will of God from my life. And I will do it with confidence. I will do it with joy, even if it's not what my mind, what my flesh wants. This is the attitude that I believe Jesus wants to see in all of his followers. It's the paradox of persistence. My sermon title, The Paradox of Persistence. The absence of resistance to the revealed will of God, which is a gift he gives us through the Spirit. If we surrender, if we repent, he gives us that more and more each day. No more resistance. There's no more rebellion, God. I'm giving it all to you. The absence of resistance to the revealed will of God. But with that, and it is a paradox, at least it seems to be, an attitude of maniacal passion to receive everything that God is ready and willing to bestow. To go for it. I love what Joe, he just said it to me again this morning. God's revealed will for us. Say it again.
I said several things. What did I say? Heal the sick. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cast out devils. That's pretty simple.
Heal the sick, raise the dead, cast out devils, do the work of the kingdom. Do the work of the kingdom. It reminds me of Peter. You remember when he had sinned terribly? And by the way, you ever have one of those weeks where you just fall on your face? I did this last week. I'm so glad for God's forgiveness today. And I believe that Peter needed that when he had betrayed the Lord. And remember when he realized that was Jesus there on the beach, and he swam in, and he's hanging on for dear life. Lord, get out of here. Leave me alone. And yet he's clinging for all he's worth. His words are saying one thing. His actions are saying, don't leave me. Bless me. Let me know that I'm forgiven. It's like Jacob hanging on to Jesus. I will not let you go until you bless me. Bless me, please. I will not let you go. And I have a little testimony. I may have shared it the last time I shared with you, but it's worth retelling. This happened sometime in the last few weeks, months. I don't remember the exact day. But you know, it's been an interesting journey because I love working in the church. I love being the youth pastor of this church. I love the things that happen here, the worship, the fellowship, the ministry, the service. I love those days when people are coming to get fed and to be blessed, to be in God's house. I love all those things. And sometimes I complain, I say, God, can't I just do that full time? Being a hospice chaplain is great, but God, really? I feel spread so thin, and I just whine and moan, and I'm sure God's up there going, ah. There he goes again. It says in the Psalms, God laughs, I think maybe that's one of those moments when he's laughing. Oh, Mark. But I turned on the radio one day, and there was a radio preacher on, and there was an interview, and both the preacher and the lady being interviewed said the same thing. They said it several times. I just said, okay, God, the joke's on me. Here's what they said. How do you have to be? I like to change. I say, how do you get to be? But this is what he said. How do you have to be even if your circumstances never change? What if this is it? What if this is the place God has planted you, and because you want to obey God, this is where you're going to stay? How do you have to be to make that work? It's kind of on me to work that out. And it was a reminder. Several things, but one thing, I'm not so special that the death to that false self was not required of me. It was. I was living out of my corrupt ego. I was giving it power. As Steve always talks about, that's not us. That's not the real us. We're saved. The sinful nature has died. And yet, sometimes I'm dumb enough to allow it to still have authority in me. But what I began to see as I surrendered to that word was that God had given me a great gift. Something that I was interpreting as mere crumbs from the table was actually a deep river of grace and healing, incredible opportunities to serve and to grow and to be an agent of salvation and transformation. Not just for my patients and their families, for our agency, our hospice agency that's been going through some very, very challenging times. And to wake up and say, you want to be a pastor? Here's your church. Help these people. They're looking to you. They're looking to you to be their pastor, and you're whining and moaning and wanting to be someplace else. And here's what I discovered. The crumbs become gold when we choose to live in that paradox of persistence. Total surrender coupled with a faith that moves mountains. It is then that we no longer care if we have a position at the table of plenty, or if God calls us to grovel in the pain of rejection and illness and suffering and loss. Whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. God has prepared a table before us, even in the presence of these enemies, whatever they are for you and me today. The cup of salvation is overflowing. It really is. His grace has saturated the very cells that make up our bodies and minds today. When Jesus Christ is your source, you trust and thrive, no matter what your circumstances. There's an old story I like. An evangelist that's probably retired by now, old Adventist evangelist Kenneth Cox. He told a story often in his appeal time. And I just love the story. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's a great story. It's about an unbelieving plantation owner and his believing slave that he trusted, that he knew was close to the Lord, that he knew God. And he knew that he was on his deathbed. And he knew of only one person that he trusted to counsel him and help him in that transition. So he brought his slave in. He said, what do I do? I'm about to die. I have no assurance of anything beyond this life. The slave looked at him. And he said, Master, I'll tell you what you need to do. You need to get up out of that bed and come out with me and slop the pigs. That was probably a pretty tough word to receive, huh? The master laid there for a few minutes. The Spirit was touching him, going deep. He finally said, all right. And he started to get up with the last ounce of strength that he had. And then the slave said, no. Lay back down. You just have to be willing. You just have to be willing. So many stories that reveal this principle. How about that little maid who was captured by Naaman, captured by the Syrians, and either by Naaman or sold as a slave to Naaman? Perhaps her family had been killed or she missed them if they were still alive. Yet, she chose to bless her master despite her bitter captivity. Or how about Esther, who chose to identify with her people who were really under the gun? She risked everything, willing to lose her position and her life to save her people. There's another piece to this story. The suffering daughter. We focus so much on Jesus and his encounter with this woman and the disciples, but it's important to mention there's this girl at home. Was she a small child? Was she a teenager? Was she an adult? We don't know. But she was healed. Through the faith of her mother, God touched this girl from a distance. You know, this would be a nice word actually for the early church, to realize that even though Jesus is no longer physically here, the healing power is still there. He can heal from a distance. That's for us today. He can heal from a distance. As if he's actually here in the flesh, The healing power is that amazing. The suffering daughter who is healed, I'm going to suggest, represents a generation, the generation of potential and possibility that it is at least partially dependent on the older folks getting to that place of surrender and trust and persistence in seeking God's heart, getting the space ready for them when they're ready to step into leadership. I've seen it over and over. And I would also suggest, and think about our nation and what we're seeing in the media, MTV. The daughters of a society, the daughters of a realm, are perhaps the barometer of its health. Are they exploited and abused and objectified and denied opportunity, their full humanity? Or are they loved and cherished, cared for, and provided every opportunity to reach their potential? Just yesterday, I heard on the radio a speech given by this young lady from Afghanistan, or Pakistan, I can't remember which country, Malala Yousafzai. I don't know if I said her name correctly. She was the girl that was on the school bus going to school. And the Taliban got on the bus, and they started shooting. She got hit in the head, but she survived. Just yesterday, it was announced that she has received the Nobel Prize for Peace for this year, giving her a great platform to share the message that God has put on her heart, a message of forgiveness. She said, if that Talib was standing before me and I had a gun, I wouldn't shoot him. I'd forgive him. Because I've learned from my spiritual teachers, and she mentioned Jesus as one of her teachers. I thought, well, that's good. Shout out for Jesus. But she said, it's about all the children of the world having the opportunity to be educated, to reach their potential. That's the kingdom of God, and that's what we're about as well today, aren't we? Malala Yousafzai. Look it up. She gave a speech at the United Nations last year. It was very powerful. One of the reasons I chose this story, and hearing this yesterday was just one example of this. It seemed like over the past few days, there were so many occasions where I was confronted with a story or a situation involving daughters in need of a blessing, daughters in need of being healed or touched or reconciliation. I have a patient who's been estranged from her daughter for 15 years or so, and she's dying. I'm encouraging her, let the pride go. Call your daughter. I'll call her. I'll see if she's willing to talk to you. Whatever we got to do to make that happen. One boarding care that I go to in the afternoon, they've always got the TV on, and it's this police drama that I've never seen except in that facility. It's called Blue Bloods. Some of you familiar with that show? It's about this whole family. They're all involved in law enforcement, and I think the daughter is a district attorney, and one of the sons is a detective, and the dad is the chief of police in New York City. Anyway, it's an interesting show. But the one that I just saw just a couple days ago, there was a serial killer on the loose, and he had the plan to get this daughter, who was a district attorney, and to kill her. And it was set up, she was going to meet her dad for dinner across the street from the government building. And this guy showed up, and somehow she was able to get a phone call out and alert her father. And you're thinking, what's going to happen? Of course, you know that nothing bad's going to happen to her because of the show. But still, it feels a little tense, like, oh no. And then there's Dad. And what did he say? I love what he said. Get your hands off my daughter. And the guy kind of waffles, and he blows him away. Just blew him away. Get your hands off my daughter. I think of Ruth. She was willing to get down on her hands and knees and grab the crumbs, the leftovers. And she got the guy. We get the guy, our kinsman redeemer. And you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't have a proud father moment today. My precious daughter, Julia, she's still, well, I can't say too much about her because it's her life, right? There's a lot I would say, but if it got back to Dad, why are you telling him that? But I can do this. She's studying English at La Sierra University, and she's just coming into her own. I'm so proud of her. She's in the master's degree program. She's teaching freshman English this year. She's writing for the student paper. In fact, this weekend she's down at a tattoo convention in San Diego as a journalist because she's writing an article about whether Christians should have tattoos, And just like, whoa. But she had a class last year in which the students were supposed to write an article for publication and submit it. So she did. I helped her. Well, Dad, what are some magazines? And we thought about different ones. Well, she sent a story about an experience she had when she was a little girl to the Adventist Journal for Kids called Guide Magazine. And she got back a reply saying, we're going to publish it. It's still not out, so it still hasn't been published, so we don't know. But she got paid a little bit, which was nice. And then she submitted an article to a journal called Adventist Today. And she got word that they were going to include it in their fall issue. And it just came out. And I ran into somebody who had access to several copies, and he said, take a stack. It's a proud moment. She got the cover story of this magazine. And it's a beautiful article. I'm so, so proud of her. Young adults fading from the Adventist church. And it's just really good. She talks about her experience. She's attended 3 different Adventist colleges and just sharing where she is and how she's thinking about God, Christianity, her relationship to the Adventist church she was born and raised in. I'm so proud of her. Despite my inconsistencies and checkered history as her dad, and yet she still talks to me. I remember when she was a baby, and I'd put her to bed, Daddy, let's talk. Let's talk. And we still do. We go to concerts. We're going to go see our favorite band, Switchfoot, again in a couple weeks. I'm so proud of her. Kingdom Life Fellowship. You and me as individual Christians, and then as a community. What is our place in the kingdom? Sometimes we have that question. Sometimes I have that question. Maybe you don't, but I do. Is it to be known and recognized as the kingdom people, leading the way? Maybe someday a mega church with mega influence throughout this region, throughout the world? Or is it to be a small, seemingly insignificant little puppy of a church, just scraping by financially, unlike some of the more affluent churches around that we might envy? But here's the word that I believe Jesus would say to us, unless he was ready to tell us the answer to that question. But here's what I think we should say. If we're called to slop the hogs, then let's do it well. If we are called to gather the precious crumbs of blessing and truth falling off the table, let's get some good knee pads and go for it. If we are called to feed the hungry, heal the sick, open the blind eyes, cast out the demons, raise the dead, bind up the wounds of hopelessness and despair, we can say yes, yes, yes to that word. And if the time comes and we are called to a higher influence, to stay humble, in full surrender to the will of God, always maintain the passionate and maniacal persistence of people who know that only Jesus is their source. And he really does want us to win the argument. He really does. To win that argument that heals our daughters and our sons, that heals our brothers and sisters. And we can be that, can't we? We don't have to wait for a month from now, or 2 months from now, or a year from now. We can be that right now, and we are. In Jesus' name.